Are we ready to go? All right. I think it's right at the top of the hour, so maybe I'll give it another minute or two for people to roll in, and then we'll get started.
Laura seems to have a problem.
No sound, she says. And someone else agrees. Can anyone hear me?
I can still hear you.
So the people in the Hangout, but maybe not. And Michael's asking if there's video. There should be, Michael, you should be able to hear me and you should be able to see me. Rob says he can hear okay, but a lot of other people say they cannot. Folks who are asking, oh, okay, here's a bunch of people saying they can hear and see. So maybe there was just a little bit of a lag. Well, it looks like it's about 50-50. Half of the people say they can hear and half of the people say they can't. I think I should just go ahead, right?
Yeah, I think we should start.
Okay, well, there will be a recording if folks are having trouble hearing or seeing things. I'm not sure why that would be, but it looks like at least a lot of people are getting this to work. So welcome to the second of these Developers Day Show and Tell sessions. This is joint production of the Igloo and Aluna special interest working groups for interoperability, analytics, and linked open data. We're trying to do these once every month or two, although we may take a summer hiatus. We'll see how that goes. But if you have ideas for show and tells in any of these areas, please do get in touch with either me or Mehmet Celik or John Krug from the analytics group, and we'll look at setting something up. I know that we're looking to plan some sessions on Tableau for the analytics group, and there's probably something coming down the pike from the linked open data group as well. I also want to remind people that if you are interested in the Developers Day event at Igloo, we're accepting presentation proposals at this time, and I would encourage everyone to register for Igloo and for Developers Day. And if you're interested in presenting at the Developers Day, get in touch again with myself or Mehmet or John Krug or Masoud Koker. And with that, I want to introduce Josh Weisman, who's going to be talking to us about API thresholds. Josh is the development director at Ex Libris and is been a participant in Developers Day and a variety of other things. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Josh and let him get started.
Great, Corey. Thank you. Hello, everyone. You can all, Corey and Mehmet, you can see my presentation okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll talk a little bit this afternoon or this morning about API governance thresholds. It's a sexy topic. I'm sure everyone's very excited to hear about it. But it has gotten some attention recently. And so Mehmet suggested that instead of doing individual answers in several different forums, it would have one group forum together, and I could kind of walk through some of the rationale behind the governance thresholds, explain a little bit more in detail how they work. We'll talk about some tips maybe for reducing overall API usage, and we'll talk about some ways of monitoring your API usage as well. Okay, so just a quick quote from the developers network. The developer network, we talk about how, obviously we want developers to create compelling applications. I'm always amazed every time I have the opportunity to participate in a developer's day or in a tech seminar to see some of the wonderful things that folks are doing. But also we have responsibility to everyone on the Alma and Primo SaaS platforms to ensure smooth performance, to ensure that everyone has access to a smoothly running application. And so in order to for us to be able to effectively plan for capacity, and also to prevent runaway applications from affecting everyone on our SaaS application. So what does that mean? So as a SaaS company, we provide Alma and Primo to a large number of customers, and we do every year a process, or twice a year, a process of capacity planning where we see what the pipeline is, how many customers are coming on to our applications, what their total number of bibliographic records, of staff members, of FTEs, of students. And based on those parameters, we do capacity planning to make sure we have enough capacity in our cloud to ensure smooth running applications. And of course, the problem with APIs is that there is not one single student or one single librarian who is generating the traffic from the APIs. It's a number of different applications. And so therefore it's difficult for us to ensure that the work that we do for capacity planning for the regular applications applies to our APIs as well. So we clearly don't think that one librarian is going to click several thousand times a minute on a button in Alma, or one student is going to perform himself several thousand searches in a minute. But of course with APIs and with scripts and programs you can do that. And so we need a way to tie API usage to the parameters that we have for licensing and for capacity planning, again, to make sure we have enough capacity in our cloud. And in addition to that, we, as I said before, we doubt that one librarian will press a button 1,000 times a minute, but as developers know, some programs are not 100% perfect all the time, especially during development phase, but even in production, sometimes things get away from us. And so we don't want a typo, a bug, some kind of runaway script or program to overflow our applications and then affect other customers, affect other tenants on the applications. Again, unlikely to happen in a manual situation, but with applications and API usage, that certainly can happen. So that's really the goals behind the thresholds. It's not in any way meant to limit. Of course, we are interested in creativity. We are astounded every day at the types of applications and innovative uses that you all find for the APIs. As you can tell by the fact that we continue to add additional APIs and add additional entry points to our systems. Every month we're adding additional APIs. And so if our goal was to reduce API usage, we wouldn't do that. The opposite is true. We're encouraging it. We just need a way to control for these scenarios and also to plan efficiently. So that's some of the background of the goals of why we have them in place. So now, what are those thresholds? Okay, so as I mentioned before, in order to tie it somehow to the capacity planning process that we do, we tied it to the license parameters that we license our software based on. So for Alma, that is named users, okay, and for Primo, that's FTEs or students. So for Alma, it's 100,000 per named user per day. And many of you are aware of the fact that that was, 1,000, not 100,000. That was 1,000. That's a typo there, of course. 1,000 per named user per day. Many of you are aware of the fact that it was recently increased. It was 500 when we first released the thresholds. And based on your feedback, and again, in the fact that we're not looking to block anyone, we monitor our customers' usage of the APIs all the time and where their actual usage is versus where their threshold has them. And what we saw, let me just fix that now so it's not screaming out there as being incorrect. There we go. And so, we did see that while for most customers 500 per user per day was plenty, we did see that for some customers we're getting close to that number, and so we decided to double that just to make sure that there's plenty of room there. That's on the daily threshold. I also have the links here, so I'll share this presentation afterwards. You can get more information at those 2 links on the bottom. And then there's a concurrent threshold. So the concurrent threshold is, again, to prevent some kind of runaway script.
Josh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think the screen we're seeing is the screen where you can edit your PowerPoints rather than the actual slides themselves, because I don't think they're actually advancing where we're viewing.
Interesting. So let's see if I can. Is that better?
Yes, that is much better. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we didn't miss much. I just talked about the goals of the threshold. You can see them advancing now, and then the thresholds themselves. And so I mentioned the daily threshold, and then there's a concurrent one also. So the concurrent threshold is, again, just to prevent some kind of bug from overwhelming the platform and affecting usage or speed and performance for other customers. Okay, so those are our thresholds. And just to kind of give some examples, so there was some confusion about how the thresholds worked for Primo and for Alma. So the thresholds are cumulative. So if you have a license for Alma and for Primo, we add together your Alma threshold and your Primo threshold together, and that's your total Ex Libris API REST threshold for the day. So we're not counting per Alma or Primo. You could use them either way, and it's a total per day. So an example here where you've got 50 named users, so as I said, that's 1,000 per day, that's 50,000. You've got 10,000 FTEs, that's another 5 times 10,000, another 50,000. So the total here is 100,000. And shows nice and easy numbers, so I can get the math right, hopefully. Institution B has 100,000 for Alma, and then 125 for Primo. You put that together, and it's 225. Institution C, it might be a scenario where a customer only has Alma, and therefore they have 200,000 total. So again, API usage is calculated and summed up for both products, and so you have quite a large number of API calls per day. Okay, so that's a little bit about the thresholds themselves, and that's a little bit about how we calculate them together. So how do you know how many API calls you're actually making a day? So you can go into the developer network. You can go into the developer network dashboard, and you can click on analytics. Okay, and there is a graph there that shows you broken down by day how many API calls you're making. So this is my dashboard. It's pretty sad, I admit. I haven't gotten to the creativity that you all have gotten to yet, and so I have anywhere between 15 and maybe 90 calls a day. But obviously yours will likely have much larger numbers if you are a heavy user of the APIs. But here you can see kind of an overall basis how many API calls you're making a day and how close you are to your total number. Okay, so that's if you go into the developer network dashboard as an organizational administrator. And so if you have here the organization tab, then you will have the reports, the analytics as well, and you'll be able to see that that graph there. But because this is, again, we feel it's a topic that is either confusing or important to a lot of customers, we're putting some work into this area now to give you additional information about what your what your API thresholds are and what your usage is. Okay, our goal is to make this as transparent as possible and to show you exactly where you are, to give you as much information as we can. So the next slide will have some mock-ups of what we're working on right now as we speak. I expect this to be out before Igloo, so during the summer this will come out, and by the time Igloo rolls around, we should have this in place, and you'll be able to enjoy it. So essentially, what we'll do here is, you can see on the left, we'll have a graph that shows today's requests, okay, every 10 minutes, to see how many requests, if you have any spikes during the day. We'll also show you the plan that you're currently on. Okay, so we have API plans. So if your API threshold is 225,000 a day, we might round that up to 250. So again, that's kind of behind the scenes, just because we don't have the ability to break it up to the exact 1,000 that each customer has. So we'll show you exactly how many API calls you have, and we'll show you where you are in the day in your threshold for the day. So if you're approaching your threshold, you'll be able to see it. And then we'll also have a history tab, which will show you for the last 6 months where you are per day, and we'll be able to break that up by API area, whether it's Primo or Alma bibs or Alma users. You'll be able to break that down by area of API usage. Okay, so this is kind of a coming soon. This is work that we're doing now in order to make the API threshold calculations more transparent, and to make where you are and what your usage is more transparent as well, so you can manage that a little bit better. Okay, so a little bit about tips for reducing API calls. So if you've worked with any other SaaS platforms, whether it's Salesforce or Workday or any of these types of platforms, they all have. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to enable creativity and keep the platform up and running smoothly. And so we provide tips, or we advise you to reduce the number of API calls, first of all because of your API threshold, but also because when you're doing development against a remote system, you're doing REST APIs. So for those of us who are used to the RPC or the local database calls, so those might have been faster with less latency. So one of the issues, or one of the things that we give up, is that proximity to the server. And so there's going to be a certain amount of latency whenever you go out to a remote service and bring back data. And so in general, it's a good thing to do to reduce the number of API calls. It's a good programming practice in general, regardless of the thresholds. But of course, with the thresholds, it's even more important. So just a few tips here. There's also a blog post reference at the bottom of this slide, but a lot of these things are self-evident. For example, obviously, if you're getting any data that you're no longer using, we're all there sometimes. You get some data just in case, and you wind up not using it. So eliminate those API calls if you can. Any frequently used data, to cache that, and caching in general is a good thing, right? So if you're doing if you're showing a dashboard, for example, and users might go back to that dashboard often, so even cache that data for 5-10 minutes would help in the number of API calls. It makes the page load more quickly, and most likely that data has not changed unless they've actually, for example, taken out a loan in the past 5 minutes. So whenever you've got data which is frequently used or not, which does not change often, we recommend that you cache that. We also, in the Alma world, we have a number of APIs that we've provided the ability to kind of ask for multiple things in those APIs. And we've done this specifically because we want to help you reduce the number of API calls for latency and for efficiency. And so, for example, here are just 2 examples here. There are some others, but in the world of users in Alma, so you can actually ask to retrieve a summary of outstanding loans, requests, and fees. You can ask to expand the information that's returned. We don't do it by default because we want it to be as quick as possible, but if you want this extra data, we'll take a few extra milliseconds and bring it back for you. And that's kind of for a master detail view, right? So in a scenario where you might have a dashboard where you want to have your loans, your requests, and your fees summarized in the dashboard, and then the user can drill down and get more information. So we can provide to you the summary in one single call, and then you can, if the user clicks to get more information, you can execute additional calls. So for example, that might reduce 4 calls into 1, right? Instead of getting user information plus loans, requests, and fees, 4 API calls, you can reduce that to 1 for your dashboard. That's one example. Another example is if you're looking for, if you're displaying a number of bibliographic records, for example, some data from bib records, you can actually go to Alma and you can request several bibliographic records based on MMS IDs. So if you have MMS IDs, you can send, I think, up to, I forget how many, but several back to Alma, and Alma will return to you a list of those bibliographic records in one request. So again, if you're showing a page and they want to go out in AJAX or asynchronously and get some more information, it's easy to do that, get the information, parse it, and then update the page. So again, instead of doing, if you're showing 10 records on the page, instead of doing 10 calls, you can reduce that down to 1. So just 2 examples of where possible to reduce multiple requests into a single request. But you can look for more information at that blog entry at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so we've talked about why we do the why we do the API thresholds. Of course, we talk about giving you some better understanding of how they're calculated. We've talked about the visibility into your usage that you have today and that you'll have very soon. And the last thing I want to mention is sort of a coming soon, a preview. It's not 100% related to API thresholds, but it is tangentially related. I want to let you know that we're working hard on webhooks in Alma, which is a technology and methodology which is very popular today, so that instead of the client application calling into Alma to get information, you can configure Alma to call out to you when something happens in Alma. Okay, so we'll be starting by Igloo, also by September. We'll have in place the infrastructure for webhooks, and we'll have the initial webhooks in place, and then we'll start to expand them to additional areas. When more things happen in Alma, we'll be able to, to call out to your application to give you a heads up that something has happened. It opens up all sorts of possibilities for orchestration. It should get rid of polling, and this is where it's tangentially related to API thresholds, because if you're doing a lot of polling all the time to see if a job is finished, to see if activity has happened in the system, that can quickly eat up your, it's a heavy load in the system. It's not very efficient for your application to be doing that, of course, and it can quickly eat up a lot of API calls. And so this type of technology, this type of methodology is much more efficient and can significantly reduce API calls. And so hopefully Corey put out a call for presentations, so I will oblige his call. I'll send in a suggestion for a presentation. Hopefully we'll be able to preview the webhooks at the Developer Day at Igloo. So again, we're always looking to expand APIs that are available, and also other ways of integrating our systems with others. And so this is really kind of a whole new way of integration that we are just laying the groundwork for now, and will expand in the coming months and into next year. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I hope that this has given a better idea of the reasoning behind the thresholds, how they work, the calculations that are behind them, and some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of visibility, and then ways to reduce those calls, tips and tricks, as you might call them, as you're thinking about how to put together your applications. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you so much, Josh. I'm really excited to hear more about this webhooks approach that Alma is looking to implement. So I'll be looking forward to hearing more about that in Trondheim. I don't know if you have the Q&A widget open, but there are some questions coming through. I don't know how you want to handle answering those. But if you look in the left side of your screen, Josh, there's a Q&A button, and that will open up a list of questions that are coming through on the right-hand side of the screen. I can also read them to you if that makes it easier.
I see just chat and share. I don't think I see the Q&A.
Huh, okay, I wonder why. So you have the screen share and you have the chat.
Okay, we can read them.
Yeah, we can read them. I'll also say for those out listening, there is a spot in the broadcast for you to ask questions. So if I meant to mention that before. If you hadn't seen that, please feel free to post questions that you have for Josh. And I'll just read these in order that I'm seeing them on the screen. The first one is, why are the Primo thresholds based on FTE and not on the number of patrons?
Not on the number of?
Patrons.
Ah, okay. As far as I know, that is the same number. Again, we tried to base the thresholds on the primary factor in the contract, so as not to add in some additional complicating aspect. And so, since Primo is sold by FTEs, that's how the thresholds are calculated. And since Alma is sold by, one of the main factors of the Alma license is staff users, named users. That's how we calculated that.
So that's
that answers the question.
FTE as in full-time enrollment. I think that
Full-time.
might have been the confusion because perhaps the listener had interpreted that as full-time employment, the number of employees.
Full-time enrollee.
Yep.
As a student. Yep.
Great, thank you. The next is if we could get a breakdown of API calls by each API key. And I don't really understand exactly what that means, but maybe you'll understand that better.
Sure. So API keys, just to make sure everyone understands, API keys are you go into the developer network, you create an API key. And that is associated with an application, and that's how you can use, or you can break down your permissions by API key. You can break down which APIs that key has access to. You can break down the environment, if it's to your production environment or your sandbox environment. You can break down if that API key has read-only or read-write access per API area. So the API key, equivalent to application, is the way you control, in a rather granular manner, which APIs each application has access to. And so there's an interest, for example, in how many API calls a particular application might be making. So you know if you're looking to, if you have an application that's doing an outsized number of calls or a number of calls that you didn't expect, you notice to investigate there. So definitely a good point. When we have that, it's a little bit harder technically for us to implement. But we have that in the plans as well. Not sure if that will be done by Igloo, but definitely in our plans. See the value there.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what does unlimited mean against an API key entry?
So if you, in some cases, we're not limiting for example, in a scenario where there's an institution with a member of a consortium. So the individual institutions are not limited, but the threshold is at the consortial level. And so when you go into your developer network dashboard, you might see that particular institution has an unlimited plan, and we count and do a reckoning at the consortial level. But otherwise, most institutions will see an actual number there that is for their institution.
Great. The next question is whether the calculation also applies to local Primo installations.
No, this is only REST API calls that are done through the developer network. So it's an API key and through the gateway URL. So not for local.
Great. The next one I see is I've been having problems with API calls to analytics. Often they fail. The help desk said that might be fixed by an upgrade, and can you explain that at all?
We have seen that before. The analytics API is actually a wrapper on our underlying analytics platform, which is Oracle Business Analytics, Business Intelligence, OBI. And so they provide an API, and we wrap it through our gateway in order to do all of the security and authorization aspects of it. And so we have definitely seen that sometimes those APIs fail. We've been working with Oracle to try to fix that. And so far, I don't know in the past couple months if it's got better, if there's any difference there where we are with that, but I know that that's been new for a while. There are ongoing efforts between us and Oracle to try to make that better. So we've seen that, again, it doesn't help you because your application is calling the API. And so today, if you see that in your application, you might want to put a retry in there because if you get back no data and you expect to get data, you can kind of work around that issue by putting in a retry into your application. Clearly, a workaround and not ideal, but we are trying to get that fixed with Oracle.
Great. The next one I see, currently there are quite a few issues around limiting access to institutions when API limits are hit. One being all APIs ceasing to work once a limit is hit. Can the limits be applied to API keys rather than an institution?
So right, it's at an institution level. That's the way the API thresholds work. So it is, again, the number of API calls that you have for a day is at the institutional level. If you are getting that close to your threshold, that you're seeing scenarios where the threshold is over before the end of day, and you're getting your service is affected, then we should definitely talk about, let's hear what the needs are, and let's brainstorm together so we can reach out to support, and they'll put you in touch with us, and we'll try to see if there's more efficient ways. We're happy to help out. I've had a number of calls with different customers, hearing what the needs are, trying to make some suggestions similar to what I presented today, but getting down more to specifics about your needs, because we really hope that the API thresholds are high enough that you're not getting anywhere close to them on a regular basis. So I don't know whose question that was, but do reach out, and we'll see what's behind that usage.
Great. And I hope that individual will follow up with you. The next is, are API calls against UAT still counting towards the limit? I don't know what that is, but maybe you do.
If we're talking about the sandbox, so yeah, the API calls are throughout the system. So there are any API calls made, and again, you differentiate between APIs that are set against your sandbox versus against production via the API key. You can direct the API key to a particular environment, and so again, we expect that to be a very small number of API calls for testing and for development. So in the hundreds, definitely not in the tens of thousands of API calls, but some need there that weren't aware of. Same thing.
Great. The next one is, how do we get the organization option that you demonstrated to access the API usage? The person who's asking this, when they log in, don't see that option on the left-hand side of their screen. Right.
Good question. So there is an organizational administrator for each customer. So when you are provisioned for Alma or Primo, and the professional services team gives you your access to the developer network, you are an organizational administrator. You can invite other developers, other administrators to have accounts in the developer network, and those accounts are associated with your institution, so you get access to all your environments and all your applications, and that organizational administrator can make another person an organizational admin as well. So when any organizational admin, when they create or invite a user, can specify that they should also be an administrator and have access to invite additional folks, remove access for people, have access to the reports. And so if you're not seeing that option, you can just go back to your original org admin credentials. And if you don't have them, then support can help you out with that too.
Great. Thank you. The next is, can you go over Primo API limits? It sounds like this is new. Someone had been told in the past that there weren't API limits for Primo at all.
Okay, so just to clarify there, these are the Primo APIs that are going, the REST APIs that are going against the developer network, where you define the API key and you make your calls against the gateway. So it's any Primo SaaS customers who are using the REST APIs. So if I go back, I'm not sure if you can still see the presentation.
Not at the moment. We have.
Okay. So when I share the presentation, there'll be a link to the Primo APIs that are affected. But if you're looking in the Primo API section, it's the REST web services. So there are eShelf and search web services there, REST web services, and those are the ones that are that have all the additional features of the API key. And the security and the dashboard and the developer network, and those go through our gateway into our SaaS environment. So it's for those APIs, the Primo REST, Search, and eShelf APIs.
Great, thank you. The next one appears to be a duplicate, so moving to the one after that is, do you have any guidance on how to hide the API key in a URL in order to protect it?
Ah, that is an excellent question. Yes, that is a very common and popular question. So, just some background there. The authentication for using the APIs is done by API key. That API key can be provided in one of two ways: either as a URL parameter, API key parameter in the URL, or as an authorization header in the request. So if you have a scenario where you've got your application which is making calls to Alma or Primo via our API gateway, you need to provide that API key so that the gateway knows who you are, which environment to go to, which APIs you have access to, etc. And so the question is, if I have a server which is talking to Alma or Primo, so it's all server-to-server communication, and the API key can be in the URL or it can be in an authorization header, but it's server-to-server. It's not exposed to the users or to the public. But if you want to provide a link, either AJAX or data in your application, your web application. So if you provide that API key in a URL or in the page embedded as for a JavaScript call, then of course it's open to everyone, which is not great. We have the classic way to handle that scenario is to make a small proxy that essentially will get requests from your web application and then do the call server to server, so as not to expose the API key. And let me just take a look here. I will find a quick blog entry. We have a blog entry which shows an example of using a very simple Node.js proxy to handle the scenario where you have calls coming from your application. You want to do server to server to Alma and to Primo. So I will go ahead and find that link and include it in the presentation or the notes from this. You'll have access to that too.
Great, thank
so
you.
I will look at that link and provide it afterwards.
Good, good. Just a few more questions here. Someone asked, when processing 34,000 items with 2 API calls, get and put, it seems to crash after 10,000. Is this a problem on their end, or is this potentially related to a limit?
I have not heard of any. It's not related to any limit, as long as, first of all, if it is related to a limit, then you'll get back a response saying we can't, you've crossed your limit. But it seems like that's a pretty low number, so it should not be related. And we know that there are many customers who do many more API calls than that. So I would definitely try to take a look, see if you're getting any response back from the server at all. If you are, what the error message is, and if you're not, to kind of check for. Do some additional logging in the application to see how far the request gets. If it goes out to the ether and it never comes back, or if it does come back with some kind of error message. But no, it should not be related to a limit, is the short answer to the question.
Great. A couple of questions related to downloading the slides and getting blog URLs, and those will be made available after the talk. So the last question is there an easy way to find out how many named users an institution has?
That's a good question, and so because we've heard that question a lot, that's why we're going to work to put that information right on the developer network, so that so you'll have access to it, and you won't need to ask anyone. But until then, for the next month or two, if you have that question, you can ask support. They can track down the information for you.
Well, I think that's all the questions that have come in. So I guess I'll say again, thank you, and also thank you for everyone who joined us. Is there anything else you want to say in wrapping up?
Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. And as of course said, I'll provide the small deck so you can refer to it later. And I hope it was helpful.
It was definitely helpful for me, and we really appreciate your taking the time. So thank you. And thanks everyone who joined us. And once again, I'll just say that if you have ideas for future show and tells, reach out to either Mehmet or John or I, and please do also consider submitting your talk ideas for Developers Day in Trondheim. If you have any feedback on these show and tell sessions, the Google Hangouts on air structure, the way we're doing Q&A, and any of that, please also do share your feedback back with us, because we're this is a new format for us, and we're trying it out, and we would love to know how it works for those in the audience. Otherwise, I'll just say thanks again to everyone, and thanks for setting this up, Mehmet.
Thank you, everybody, and see you at the next Show&Tell.